Hey guys, welcome back to One Seed, One World. Today we're going to talk about transplanting cucumbers. And I know that today, with it being near the end of June, might seem like a weird time to be talking about transplanting cucumber seedlings out into your garden. Because normally you would do this like probably earlier in the spring or mid to late spring at the very least. So, my cucumbers I initially planted from seed, and they got about an inch or so tall, and then something came along and clipped them all off. So tip one is that sometimes if you plant from seed outside, depending on where you live, you might have certain pests that will eat your cucumber seedlings. Most likely it'll be something like an earwig or pill bugs. Now both of these insects can have beneficial things to the environment as well, but they also like to eat your seedlings. For example, pill bugs are very good at removing heavy metals from the soil. So I'm not saying like kill off earwigs and pill bugs, even though I really hate earwigs a lot. Pill bugs are the roly-polies, if you're not familiar with the pill bug term. But they also like sometimes to eat your seedlings. And so if you're in an area that runs into those kinds of problems, then you might want to start your seeds in pots inside or somewhere away from where you're initially going to plant them, where they can kind of get bigger and stronger, and then transplant them outside. When do you transplant them? Like I said, normally mid to late spring. Cucumbers like warm weather, so you want to make sure you're way past your last frost date before you put them into the ground outside. If you've started them inside, you will need to harden them off for about a week or so before you transplant them out, so that they don't get sunburned or have a lot of issues with getting that regular sun instead of just artificial light. Now these here I actually started in pots but outside, so they've only had sunlight on my back deck. I've kind of rotated them around on the really hot days, put them in some shady spots, but they've come along really strong up by the house, away from this bed where my initial cucumbers got clipped off by the whatever pest it was. So get them hardened off if you started them inside, and then get ready to transplant them outside. Tip 2, cucumbers hate their roots disturbed. So you have to be really careful if you started them in pots and then are going to transplant them out. I've had some years where I was a little rough with them and they took weeks to recover. They looked like death forever. They did eventually recover, but sometimes they can die off. So the minimum amount that you can disturb the roots, which is kind of hard if you are growing them in pots, but just be really careful like that. That one slid right out. You can see it's got a lot of roots around there in the base, and we are going to put that in now. So how deep do you plant them? Here's another tip. You're only going to plant them as deep as what they were in the pot. They're not like tomatoes where you can bury them deep up into their stems, because they will not put off new roots off stems like tomatoes do. So you just want to plant them as deep as the dirt level, top level of your dirt that was in the pot that you're transplanting them out of. Put them in the soil, dig your hole, put them in the soil, and then just push some dirt around. It's okay if it goes like a 1/4 inch or a 1/2 inch above the spot, but basically, you don't want to plant them deep. You're just going to plant them just about pot dirt level or a little bit higher. Next tip, spacing. How far do you want to space your cucumbers out? On average, you want to space them out about 1 to 2 feet. I have an 8-foot long bed here, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 cucumber plants. So I'm going to do them about 1 foot apart, so I've got them spaced across this bed. That will give them enough room to grow and not kind of like choke each other out or shade each other out. 1 foot is enough But if you've got more room, or you just want to give them more room to expand as they get bigger, you know, feel free to do 1.5 feet or 2 feet. The next tip is, do they need trellising? Generally, yes. Cucumbers do need trellising. They don't have to be trellised. I mean, you can let them crawl all over the ground, but you're going to have a couple of problems if you don't trellis them. First is their cucumbers are going to be harder to find because if they're sprawled out all over the ground, cucumbers themselves are the same color as the leaves, and so they tend to hide very well. And so if they're sprawled out over the ground, you're going to be digging around through the leaves. Whereas if they're up on a trellis, the cucumbers tend to, once they start forming, start to hang down, and they're a little bit easier to find for you. The second part of that is that if they're laying on the ground, there can be more moisture. It can cause more disease problems, rot problems, insect problems. So if they're going to trellis, they get more airflow. You've got less issues with disease and pests. Watering. Now, I'm still putting mine in here, so we'll get to the watering. But once you have planted your cucumbers, you're going to want to give them a good watering. Water them in, and then you want to keep the soil moist but not soggy. But don't let them, don't let the soil completely dry out. Our soil, this soil right now is super dry because I haven't watered this bed since there hasn't been anything in it. And it's been super hot here. So I'm going to have to give these a good watering in and hope that we get one of the rainstorms that's passing by in our area as it goes along. Now, along with the watering, the next tip is compost, fertilizing, and mulching. So once you get your plants in, do you need to give them fertilizer? You can, depends on how good your soil is. But if you plant them in with some good compost or a slow release organic fertilizer, then that will certainly help them along their path to giving you cucumbers. You can, over time also, add some additional compost or fertilizer, maybe about once a month or so, just to make sure that they're well fed. If your soil, if you're feeling like your soil doesn't have enough nutrients in it. And then with mulching, which I'm going to put a couple bags of mulch on these plants here. Mulching is going to help keep weed growth down, and it will help hold moisture in so you don't have to water as often. It will keep the soil a little bit cooler underneath. So on those really hot summer days, it's not going to be cooking your plants, even though cucumbers do like they do like the hot weather, but if it's, like over 100 degrees outside for multiple days at a time, they might be struggling. So you want to give your plants the best chance and the best ability they can to grow and produce for you. And so by helping them with some mulch, whether you use some shredded natural hardwood mulch, that's what I like using here, but you can also use things like straw or grass clippings and other things, depending on what you have, what you're able to get, and what's in your area. But in most places you can get some bags of shredded hardwood mulch. Now, don't get the dyed stuff, just get the natural stuff, because the dyes, that's just an extra chemical that's not natural in the ground that your plants don't need. While it might give some spark and color to your garden that's a little bit different, it's not necessary, and could add some extra chemicals to the ground that could potentially, I don't know if it harms your plants, but it's not anything that they need, so why bother? Plus, I think the dyed stuff costs more money anyway, so why spend more money when you don't have to, when just natural shredded mulch works just as well. But like I said, you can also use hay, straw. You can use hay, but hay a lot of times has more weed seeds in it, and so that can cause more problems later. So I would recommend maybe using straw instead of hay. All right, it's got a couple more to get in here, and then we'll get on to showing you some of the next final tips here. Man, it is hot out here today and very humid. So much so that my camera shut off in the middle of recording, so I had to bring it over here in the shade and let it cool off for a bit before I could finish. So hopefully this comes out okay. So here's a couple final tips for you. Like I mentioned, normally you would plant your cucumbers earlier in the year, like mid to late spring. They do like warm weather, and you can start them from seed even into June, early June, mid-June, depending on your growing season. On average, cucumbers, depending on the variety, will take 50 to 70 days to reach maturity. That's once they germinate. So you need to add an extra week to that, because it normally takes them about 4 to 10 days to germinate. So give them a week, week and a half on top of whatever it says the maturity date is on your package. Once they reach maturity date, that means that they are mature enough to start producing fruit for you. So you have to kind of figure that in with your last frost date and all that sort of thing, and make sure you have enough time. But if you're planting some seeds in early June, and that's what I did, and like late May, early June, and now we are 4 to 5 weeks later, and I'm transplanting them in the ground, and they're already, you know, yay tall. So hopefully by the end of July, early August, mine will start producing fruit, and I'll still get a month or 2 months worth of cucumber harvest. It'll just be much later in the season than what I would normally get. So you do have some leeway there when you are planting cucumbers. Next tip is that you will want to pick your cucumbers early, as in when they're younger. They will taste better, and it will help the plant. The more you pick them, the more they will produce. And if you let a cucumber get where they're like really big and start turning yellow, that means they have reached full maturity, and that will actually kill off your plant, because the plant now knows that it has a mature fruit full of viable seeds that can propagate its existence, right? It's going to put off offspring. So it's like, okay, I'm done. I've produced viable seeds. I can die off now. So don't let your cucumbers get too big, and don't let them turn yellow, because that will kill off your cucumber plants. You will want to pick them young and early. You'll get a lot of cucumbers that way. They will taste fantastic, and you won't have to worry about your plant dying off early. Also, be prepared for some transplant shock. Like I said, cucumbers don't like their roots to be disturbed at all. And if there is the least amount of disturbance, they will go into some transplant shock. I've had some years where I disturbed them too much, and for about a month, they looked like death. Every single day I came out and I was like, yep, I'm not gonna get any cucumber plants this year. They're all gonna die. They did eventually recover. The more that you can reduce the amount of disturbance to the roots during transplanting of your seedlings, the better they will be, and the faster they will recover and take off and do a great job producing cucumbers for you. All right, so I hope these tips with transplanting cucumbers was helpful for you, and I hope that whatever's going on in your neck of the woods is going on fantastic this season. But I appreciate that you're here hanging out with me again today, and we will see you again soon. Have a great day. Namaste.